The Corporation for Public Broadcasting will be largely shuttered by the end of next month and gone entirely by January. At President Trump's request, Republicans in Congress canceled its federal funding last month, and that spelled the end of the organization's half a century of supporting public radio and television. Now, much has been made of the impact that these cuts are going to have on local news stations, particularly in rural areas. But the Corporation for Public Broadcasting has also played a huge role in supporting high-quality educational programming on PBS, where Sesame Street and Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood originated. And where that legacy of iconic educational programming lives on with the Mr. Rogers spinoff, Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, and programs like Sid the Science Kid and Word Girl. Meanwhile, the White House appears to be eyeing an alternative to these kind of PBS Kids programmings that teach kids social, emotional skills, science readiness, and literacy. PragerU is an unaccredited, non-professional organization founded by conservative talk show host Dennis Prager in 2009. It specializes in creating right-leaning, short educational videos for children and adults, but don't mistake it for a university despite its name. The organization does little to hide its intent to indoctrinate children with right-wing ideology, and on the bottom of its website, you can find the following disclaimer, quote, PragerU is not an accredited university, nor do we claim to be. We don't offer degrees, but we do provide educational, entertaining, pro-American videos for every age, end quote. According to Vox, in July, the White House debuted an educational partnership with PragerU at a launch event for a new museum exhibit. Now, the thing about PBS and PBS Kids, which made parents trust their programs, is the fact that education professionals and early childhood development specialists played a vital role in producing and developing them. Sesame Street, in particular, was designed to help low-income and minority students aged 2 to 5 overcome some of the disadvantages that they traditionally had when entering school. In fact, a 2016 study found that children in households who were exposed to Sesame Street were 14% more likely to be enrolled at the correct grade level for their age at middle and high school. So to put it simply, PBS Kids is programming in the public interest. It's improving society while your kids are watching TV and you're off doing something like washing the dishes. The payoff may not be immediate, but the impact is long-lasting. PragerU's content is already being deployed in 10 states across America, including Florida, Arizona, and Louisiana. These partnerships allow PragerU's materials to be used in public school curricula while not mandating it. But one of PragerU's most loyal supporters happens to be the state currently ranked 50th in education, Oklahoma. This week, Oklahoma announced it will require teachers from New York and California to pass an America First test designed by PragerU before being hired in the state. The state's public school superintendent said the test is an effort to root out, quote, radical leftist ideology from classrooms and warned that Connecticut, Illinois, Minnesota, and others could soon join the list. So what's so concerning about PragerU finding champions in the White House and in other states? I'm going to let you be the judge.
The southern colonies were dependent on slave labor, and they wouldn't have joined a union that had banned it.
Are you okay with that?
I'm certainly not okay with slavery, but the Founding Fathers made a compromise to achieve something great, the making of the United States.
Most gender stereotypes exist because they reflect the way that men and women are naturally different.
One of the most beautiful things God has created is a woman's smile. It can fill a room with energy and joy. Just try smiling and see how it affects the people around you.
Chicago is a bustling metropolis famous for food, fun, and an iconic skyline. But beneath those tall buildings, Chicago has a dark side and a long history of crime, poverty, and low-performing schools.
Slavery is as old as time and has taken place in every corner of the world, even amongst the people I just left. Being taken as a slave is better than being killed, no? I don't see the problem.
I don't see the problem. Wow. That's what some children in America are learning. I'm joined now by the Democratic State Representative of Oklahoma, John Waldron. Before entering the political arena, Representative Waldron was a social studies teacher in the Tulsa Public School District. I'm also here with my colleague, Antonia Hilton, co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend Primetime, author of Madness, Race and Insanity in a Jim Crow Asylum, a remarkably important book. I had to ask my producer several times about those PragerU videos to make sure we weren't being punked. I had to ask them, is that real stuff that is being shown to kids in America to teach them in lieu of PBS?
It is. In fact, Allie, just last weekend on our show, we had an educator who's also a state representative in Oklahoma named Gabe Wolion. He has used PragerU content in the classroom. So if you're wondering if the video you're showing right there, this, retelling of slavery from Christopher Columbus's point of view, what you heard from fake Frederick Douglass there, if that's actually been used in the classroom, I have met educators who have started to integrate this kind of stuff with young children. And I want to point out one thing, because a lot of people have paid attention to that Christopher Columbus clip where he says, that being taken as a slave is better than being killed, and he doesn't see a problem. Not only is that an opinion and a sort of form of propaganda to put in front of children, but actually primary source documents from slaves themselves that educators across the country have access to completely undermine that. People who were enslaved spoke very often about the fact that they were willing to put their lives at risk, willing to die in order to escape plantations in the South. Frederick Douglass, in fact, attempted multiple escapes, and he famously got engaged in a physical altercation with a notorious slave breaker who was trying to dominate and harm him. And fighting back when you are an enslaved person is something that, again, they knew could end their lives.
Yep.
And so it's actually not just a little wrong, it is really insidious. And I say that as a journalist who's covered this, that simply the facts, the records, primary and secondary source documents that we've had access to for many years in this country go against so much of the programming that is getting in front of children. When I've spoken to educators about why they would use this, they say, well, it's about alternative perspectives, or, some of the documents we have are liberal perspectives, and this is a conservative one. But it's really not that. There's the truth, there's the reality of what slavery represented to the United States, and then there seems to be this major push that's been gaining steam for years now to recast the entire American story, to resist feeling guilt about what happened and what was a central part of our founding. And it's really alarming for the educators who are being pushed to use this stuff, for the parents who are finding out their kids are exposed to it. And it's having a real impact. You just spelled out it's in 10 states already, but I've spoken to Dennis Prager. I know their team. I've visited their headquarters in California. They have a 50-state strategy.
Yeah. Oklahoma's got real issues in terms of education. I mean, it's not that people in Oklahoma shouldn't be completely invested in improving public education on every level. If Oklahoma's got the education rankings it's got, it would sound like that's an all-of-government effort to fix that, not this.
Correct. And I want to point out that I actually was born and raised in New Jersey and moved to Oklahoma 25 years ago. I taught for 20 years at Booker T. Washington High School, go Hornets, and it's a great school. But under Republican leadership, we have fallen down to 50th from 17th in the nation. And I think that's a more important conversation to have.
Talk to me about how this goes in Oklahoma. How is this unfolding?
Well, first of all, I want to point out that we do have an excellent public television network in Oklahoma. OETA is very popular and has a lot of public support. And if we replace that kind of content with clearly indoctrinatory material from out-of-state vendors, I think the taxpayers of Oklahoma have a good question to ask about that. And the parents of the 700,000 kids in Oklahoma public schools should be wondering whether this is a policy that really is designed to serve the best interest of the kids. I firmly believe as a classroom teacher that it's not our job to teach students what to think, but to show them how to think for themselves.
Antonia, PragerU's CEO responded to that Christopher Columbus video they put out. Here's what she had to say. She said, "We basically paraphrased what he, meaning Christopher Columbus, would have said to two young kids. And from Christopher Columbus's perspective, he probably thought that slavery was okay because that's what he did. And so because we had the cartoon Christopher Columbus say, 'Oh, I think slavery is okay,' and then the kids responded back to him in this show that we made, 'Well, slavery is actually abhorrent. It's a horrible thing.' That's why we're being attacked, because we were paraphrasing what Christopher Columbus would have said." Talk to me a little about that unusual response.
Yeah, I think I've met the CEO. I've sat down with Dennis Prager as part of Meet the Press mini documentary that I worked on through NBC just a little over a year ago. And so I'm aware of their response because I showed them a lot of their own content to get an understanding about the strategy here. And I think what always kind of allows them to relieve themselves of responsibility is that this is edutainment, is a word that often their team uses. They always say it's sort of supplemental, this is just another tool to use along with all kinds of other sources. But the reality is if you're putting a video like that in front of children who are 5, 6, 8, 10 years old, they're going to look at Christopher Columbus, the adult in the room in that video, and see him as an authority figure. I mean, he's a figure who's still celebrated throughout much of the United States. Kids learn about him. He's seen as important, whether you like him or not. And so to hear him describe the institution of slavery in a particular way, that's going to be an opinion that carries a lot of weight, maybe more weight than a young child who's depicted in the video. Because the purpose of that video series is they have these two children who go back in time and they meet figures like Frederick Douglass and Christopher Columbus, and they engage in conversations with them. But the whole point is we're young kids trying to learn about the world. So you're meeting these people who are going to teach you about the world. And so that kind of creates a framework of legitimacy there. And that's where, for the educators that I speak to, the concern comes in, that kids are going to hear what Christopher Columbus says there and believe that that is a fact. Oh, slaves must have preferred being slaves to losing their lives. When, again, that is simply not just kind of untrue or debatable, but goes against everything we know about the lengths at which people went to free themselves, to find freedom across the United States. And so, again, the question is, how is this being integrated into the classroom? How are teachers framing this when they show it to students? And from what I've seen, they're often pulling it up, showing it as sort of part of a lesson on American history. And they're not explaining, and they're not giving the statement you just heard from the CEO there. That's lacking. And so the video is what it is, and it's presented as fact to kids when they're coming across it in schools, on YouTube, or wherever else they come across PragerU.
Oklahoma curriculum should be written by Oklahoma educators to meet the needs of our school children. We don't need PragerU to come in and tell us how to teach our kids. And yet this state superintendent, who acts like he's auditioning for some other job, has been using this out-of-state company to put his own message into our classrooms. And I don't think that's fair. I also want to point out that we're in the middle of a massive teacher shortage in Oklahoma. And to provide this kind of ideological screening makes no sense.
Thanks to both of you this morning. I appreciate it.
Can I add one thing to that? Which is the other piece of this has been the argument that this is supplemental. This is just another tool in your toolkit. But PragerU is behind the quiz that you described, that teachers from New York and California are going to have to take in order to prove that they're not woke and undeserving of being educators in the state of Oklahoma. So that means PragerU is not supplemental. They're actually directly intervening in the approval, the sort of certification process for someone to be able to be an educator in one of our 50 states.